Anika Noni Rose, you star in Roots as Kizzy, who is the daughter of Kunta Kinte and Belle, and the mother of Chicken George. And of course, Roots was previously made as a miniseries back in 1977. Had you seen the original version before this opportunity came about?
I haven't seen it in the recent past. I saw it when I was a child. I saw it in, I think, junior high. They aired it, but I didn't watch it again before working on it. I feel that in order to respect the people who came before me and their performances, I give them that space, but also in order to respect the performance that I want to give without having the imprint of what somebody else did. I like to come to it fresh and clean. So I haven't seen it in a very, very long time, but I probably will watch it again soon, just to pay its dues.
Yeah, since the previous version was such a famous TV event, this new version did have a lot to live up to. What were your first thoughts when you first found out that it was being remade?
When I first found out, my first thought was, why? What is the goal here? Are we jumping on the slave narrative bandwagon? Is this something that is going to be done with respect and care? Is there something new that we're trying to show? And so I requested to have a meeting with the producer and director, and we really had a good conversation about what their mindset was and what their plan was with regard to this new version. And ultimately, I think that it is the perfect time for it to come out again. But I wanted to make sure that it was being done with respect, and with reverence for the story being told, and with care, not just as something to possibly make some money and jump on what seems to be a storyline that is being paid much more attention to lately.
The role of Kizzy in particular seems to be, a major turning point for the story in that, she learns how to read and write, and she's very headstrong and driving a lot of the characters and her son obviously, and what appealed to you about this role in particular?
I think that one thing, I mean, you nailed a couple of things that did appeal to me, but I think that the fact that she is written in this script, in this version, as someone who is allowed to mature and become a woman. She's not stuck in a place of innocent little girldom, or in a place of softness. And that really wasn't a time where softness could be rewarded. So not that she doesn't have softness, but she has a lot of strength as well, and she is forward-thinking and very intelligent, but she also has the opportunity to find love in this script. So I was very drawn to all of those things. I think it's very important when we show women, particularly women of another time period, another era, that we don't romanticize who they were or who we think they should have been. It's really important to show, particularly in this area of our time scheme, who these women were and what made them completely well-rounded. Because I don't think that this woman could have survived walking around in happy slave mode. Certainly not. And there have been a lot of narratives recently that have been pushing the happy slave, particularly books like children's books and things. So I think that it is very important when we talk about women, and when we talk about enslaved women particularly, that we show them in a way where you see who these women are, what allowed them to make it every single day, what was their focus, their journey, what created their drive to live even another day. For me, that is extraordinarily important.
And Kizzy's, experiences, not just as a slave but as a woman, are in particular very very difficult because, as we see, she's raped by Tom Lee from an early age, and he is the father of her son George, and the compromises and the things that you have to do to survive and to live with are really extraordinary. What was it like to play that mindset of hers?
Well, you know, interestingly and sadly, it doesn't make her special that she was dealing with rape every single day. That was typical of that time period. It's, and I don't say special in a positive way. It's something that I think of certainly as I really don't know how somebody could make it through that. I don't know what level of strength and faith and um, fortitude you have to pull on to make it through that. But you know, so for me it was, what are the things that this woman goes to make every day worthwhile somehow in this circumstance, which is horrible. Um, and I think that because of the level of faith, the level of awareness, the level of self-worth and self-knowing that was handed to her by her father specifically, but also by her mother, who was no slouch. She was a doctor. She was trained by the man whose plantation, the man who owned her on her plantation, but she was also a doctor of herbal remedies, which is something that many enslaved peoples used when doctors weren't called or didn't feel like they wanted to utilize everything that they could for an animal in their care, even. So Kizzy was lucky to have had both parents, to have had a father who deemed her worthy of being trained to be a warrior, because he understood that no, he didn't have a son, but he had a girl, and her journey was going to be perhaps in some ways even more difficult. She would need to learn to be the warrior to survive. She was lucky to have had those parents. Most people did not have their parents for as long as they did, if at all. So I think that all of that and her ability to continue to love this son that came to her in the worst way you can think of, to be able to look at him and see the face of the man who put this child on her life, but still know that this is my child. This is mine. And because this is mine, I'm going to imbue him with everything that I was given and give him the strength and the courage and the desire to be a man, to know how to be a man and to recognize it and to hold on to it. I think that was a very big deal to her, because she is someone who knew not only who she was, but where she came from and the strength of what her name meant, and the name of those before her.
It's such an interesting relationship between Kizzy and her son George, because he's certainly headstrong, and he's kind of a force of nature. You know, as certainly as played by Reggae Jean Page. What was it like? You know, and they have such a pull and push and pull, and sometimes a conflict. You know, kind of dynamic. How's it working with Reggae Jean Page and you know, with those characters?
You know, it was very interesting. I think he would tell you this because, you know, he's a young man still figuring out his manhood. You know, there were things that we would deal with on the set or in the script, and he would be like, you know, but I'm a man now. And I was like, yeah, you're almost a man. But even if you're a man, I'm your mother. So that's going to trump you right now. I'm your mother. And, you know, we would have these conversations about what that meant, and when was the moment that break would happen. When was the moment that motherhood was the strongest thing in the conversation, or the strongest bond in the moment, and when was it the thing that he pushed aside, you know, which is, I think, harrowing for any mother for her child to push her aside, but specifically a mother who is in this situation so hell-bent on protecting this child from being hurt because he simply doesn't understand the world that he was put into. He really thinks that this man treating him as if he is special because he has this amazing skill and the gift of magical mouth is going to be something that makes him different from someone else on the plantation or on another plantation. And he didn't understand that that only went so far. And so I spent a lot of time trying to imbue him with that information and to give him as much love as possible, because I knew that the world was not going to love him. The world was going to do everything it could to make sure that he was unable to become what God made him, which is a fully grown man.
Now, I think this is a multi-generational story, and the way it develops, Kizzy as a a younger teenager is played by a different actress. So by the time you appear on in the story, you don't have any scenes really with Malachi Kirby and Mayatsi Cornaldo who play your
So
parents. Uh, did you have a was the miniseries shot in a way that allowed you to see any of their work at all before you
no,
were able to film your own?
no, their episode was actually shot after our episode. So Malachi had shot episode 1 in Cape Town, and then he came to our set and they started to shoot their episode, I think, the last week that we were shooting ours, maybe the last couple of days, actually. So Emiatsi is somebody that I know anyway, and we've been at the nail salon together in LA. But Malachi is somebody who I hadn't met before. And when I met him, I was so goofy. I met him in the lunchroom and I gave him a big hug and I was like, oh, it's so good to see you. And like, it wasn't until I had filled my plate and sat down that I realized that I had never met him before. But there was something so familiar and beautiful about this man's spirit that I really, from that moment, felt like we had known each other. I have a great love for him. I think that he is so deeply honest, and such a caring, careful person. Not careful like, oh, let me make sure I don't step on this crack down here, but full of care and one who gives. And I think when you watch his performance, you know that there isn't a false bone in his body. He's a beautiful, beautiful person. I love him very deeply, and I feel truly that this was his role. There was no one else who could have done it in the way that he did it, and that is a special thing.
The miniseries aired for over 4 straight nights from May 30th to June 2nd. Was that the first opportunity you had gotten to see the whole thing put together?
I still haven't seen one episode, but yes, it was the first time that I had the opportunity to see as much as I saw. Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like? After having worked on your segment of the miniseries, and then getting to see more of the finished product.
I thought it was really thrilling because you really don't know what you're a part of. Like, you feel like you do, but you know it from such an insular way that you are not really aware of what the final product is going to be. Most of the time, you know if you're in a mess. You know if you're in a mess generally, but you don't know necessarily always how good or special or moving something is going to be. You might just be walking around knowing it's not a mess. So I saw the first episode actually at the premiere, and I was so moved by it. I thought the beauty of Africa and these villages and the people, seeing them in all of their tribal decorated glory. I thought Ruth Carter and the South African designer did such an amazing job with the indigo that they put on these people, the colors and the fabrics. And I thought that it was just so much more of a clearer journey, not because the first movie didn't do a great job, but because we were in a place where we just had a lot more information to utilize, and it was shown more. I think this version is much more from the viewpoint of the enslaved person than it is from the people, the masters and mistresses holding them captive. And I think that because of that, you really get to see what is so sociopathic about that system, but you also truly get to see the strength and intelligence and perseverance of the people that we are focusing on. I was very proud of what I saw that night, and I thought it was compelling and something that made me want to see the very next thing. And to see little Miss Sanaya Sidney, who was little baby me, who was also pretty great. I'm proud of it, and not just because of what I was looking at, but also because of the reactions of people who have come up to me to talk about it, of all different age ranges, many of whom felt like they didn't want to watch it. They weren't going to watch it because they didn't. Why are we doing this? Why are we seeing? I don't want to see our people like this again. Or you know, the first one was magnificent, for whatever reason. They watched anyway, and they were drawn in, and they watched it to the end. And I had some amazing like tweets from people telling me how much pride it gave them and who they were and who their grandparents and great grandparents were, and parents who got to sit down and watch it with their children and share it with them and teach them this history that frankly isn't in our school books. I mean, let's just be frank, it's not there. You get a couple of pages, maybe, but it's not in any type of detailed way. I was inspired by the amount of people who, you know, could take this as an opportunity, white people who could have an opportunity to feel, oh, this makes me feel really guilty, or this makes me feel uncomfortable because many of the white people in this time period, in this moment, in this show are not seen in a good light. But I was really inspired by the amount of people who watched this and said, this is an amazing piece of history. I appreciate it being told. Thank you for telling this story, and also shared it with their children, because this is not a story that is simply for Black Americans. This is a story that is for Americans. This is a story that is about the formation of what we know of as this country right now, today. So it is not my story and not your story and not my story. You know, it is so much more than that. And I was really, really pleased and thrilled at the amount of people who got that and understood that and are telling their friends to pay attention to it and watch it and to know more about why we are who we are today, why we treat each other the way we treat each other today, why we have the opinions we may have when we look at someone else, whatever that means to you today. I've really been moved by that.
In addition to all the great TV work you've done, you're also very well known for your theater work. You won a Tony for Carolina Change, and you were nominated again a couple of years ago for A Raisin in the Sun. Having worked your way up in the theater world earlier in your career, how much did that Tony win mean to you?
How much did what?
How much did that Tony Award mean to you?
Let me tell you, when your peers recognize you and what you have done, there's really nothing like it. Are you doing the work for that? No, you're doing the work hopefully because you love the work and because the work moves you and you want to touch people. But when your peers, I just remember that night, and I was in the theater, and I didn't expect to win. I was brand new. I was like, I'm so excited to be here. And they called my name and they said my first name, and it was like I went deaf. I couldn't hear anything else. I couldn't tell you if they pronounced my second name correctly. I just knew I got up on that stage and I did not trip. And I turned around and I looked at Radio City Music Hall. And there are a lot of producers and all sorts of people, but there's also a balcony full of everyday regular people cheering and standing. And I saw my composer climbing over a seat to get to the director to touch his arm. It was the most magnificent moment. It was absolutely magnificent, and I will never ever forget it. And I am very thankful to Tony Kushner and George Wolfe and Janine Tesori for creating a role for me that people were able to see something that they felt was very special in when it was in my body. It was amazing.
Yeah, we're recording this now three days before this year's Tony Awards, or as they'll probably be better known, the Hamilton Awards. And you actually performed the role of Angelica in Hamilton when it was workshopped a few years ago. Did you imagine what phenomenon that show would eventually become?
I knew exactly what it was going to be. I knew exactly what that show was going to be because it was that already with only a first act completed. It was the most genius thing. And like with regard to theater and musical theater, the thing that I have been more excited about than, many other things in many years. And that's not a diss to anybody else's work. It is truly just the truth of what this work is. It is changing theater. It is changing the way we see history, the way we tell history, the way we show history. It is changing the spectrum of what history looks like on stage, not because there is a point that needs to be made, not because somebody's like, oh, we're gonna make diversity, so we'll cast this amount of people. No, they cast the people who could do what they could do the best way that they could do it, and they cast it without worry to whether or not they looked just like these people who we don't really know what they look like anyway because it was so far back. Who knows if that picture was even them? You know what I mean? Like somebody drew it. Maybe I've drawn pictures. Maybe it looks like you. So I just think that the way that the story is told, the way that it is given to you, it allows young people to step into history and feel like it is theirs in a very different way. There's nothing didactic about it. It speaks to them in their own language, in their own music, in their own space, and for many of them with their own faces. So it's revolutionary. It really is revolutionary and beautiful and stunning. And I'm so proud of all of the people that were a part of it, many of whom I've worked with years ago, and I'm watching them blossom, and that is a thrilling piece of work.
Having been nominated for a Tony and won a Tony, I'm sure you can relate to what those nominees will be feeling on Sunday night. So, what advice could you give to those anxious nominees?
Pack a snack. Pack a snack because that ceremony is not short and you didn't eat before you put on your gown or your tux and you will be hungry. Bring a shawl because it's very cold in there and enjoy yourself. It really doesn't matter at this point. It's not in your hands. You've done what you can do, and what you've done is phenomenal or you wouldn't be there. So have a fantastic time. Share your Luna bar with the person next to you and know that, you've won. You've won.
Recently, you've had another major kind of moment where you were able to go back to your alma mater, Bloomfield High School, to speak to students there. After building your career over the course of the years since you, of course, were in high school, was that kind of an intense full circle kind of moment?
It was a pretty amazing moment. And I've been wanting to go back for some time and it just hasn't worked out. And the kids were so wonderful. And the school is really trying to do something with the arts that it didn't have when I was there. We had band for sure. I was in every band there was to be in. We had chorus and a show choir and all those things. I was not in that. But they're now thinking of putting some theater into it, and they're really being aware of what arts mean to students and to the student's ability to thrive, to a young person's ability to thrive. If you need to cut something in a school system, the arts is not the way to do it, because you cut off somebody's mode of speak. Somebody who maybe can't tell you what's going on at home that isn't the best that it could be. This is the way they can get it out. And when you cut arts in the school system, you watch the violence in a school system go up exponentially. directly correlated to the arts being cut. So it was exciting to see that they are very aware of that and they're very excited about what they're trying to implement. But it was also pretty amazing because this kid in the audience was like, you know, Anika, when did you decide that this was what you wanted to do? And it was in that moment that I realized that I had the realization that this was not what I wanted to do, but what I needed to do and had to do on the stage I was standing on when I was 14 years old. So yeah, it was extraordinarily full circle in that way. And I look forward to going back again. We're talking about working on some literacy programs there. And I would very much like to have a hand in that. Reading is a big deal to me. And I think that it's something that we don't celebrate quite enough. And so that's something that I want to be a part of, and they're welcoming me to do so. So it won't be the last time.
Well, I want to congratulate you again on that and on Roots, of course. And thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you. Thank you for making time.